The Misadventure of the Muddy Tour. Wyatt Harper leaned back in his weathered wooden chair, the kind that creaked with every shift of his weight, and took a slow sip of his coffee. The mug was chipped, the handle stained from years of use, but it was his favorite, a gift from his late father, who taught him everything he knew about running Harper's Hollow Farm. The brew was strong, black as the soil he tilled, and it warmed his hands against the crisp March morning. It was just past 7 on March 8, 2025, and the sun was barely peeking over the rolling hills, casting long shadows across the fields he'd spent his life tending. The farm stretched out before him like a living thing, breathing with the soft hum of nature. Chickens clucked lazily in their coop, their feathers rustling as they pecked at the dirt. In the distance, the goats, Buster and Clyde, bleated faintly, probably plotting their next escape from the pen. The pigs wallowed in their muddy haven, grunting contentedly, while the wind carried the faint scent of damp earth and hay. Wyatt loved this time of day, the quiet before the world woke up and demanded something from him. It was his moment of peace, a ritual he'd kept since he took over the farm a decade ago. He adjusted his faded baseball cap, tugging it low over his brow, and let his gaze drift across the property. The tractor sat parked near the barn, its red paint chipped but gleaming faintly in the dawn light. It was his pride and joy, a beast of a machine that had cost him more than he liked to admit. He'd spent the previous day plowing the north field, prepping it for spring planting, and the satisfaction of a job well done lingered in his chest. This was his world, hard work, honest dirt, and the kind of solitude that suited a man who'd rather talk to his animals than most people. Wyatt took another sip, savoring the bitterness, when a memory flickered through his mind. Last summer, a couple of teenagers had trespassed, snapping selfies with his cows like they were props in some social media circus. He'd chased them off with a stern warning and a wave of his pitchfork, but the irritation had stuck with him. City folks, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. They didn't get it, didn't understand that this wasn't a playground or a photo op. It was his life. He was halfway through his coffee, the steam curling up into the cool air, when the piece shattered. A low, guttural roar cut through the stillness, unmistakable and jarring. Wyatt froze, the mug halfway to his lips. It was the sound of his tractor, the deep rumble of its diesel engine firing up. His heart lurched, a jolt of adrenaline spiking through him. He hadn't touched it that morning. Hell, he hadn't even been near the barn yet. No one else was supposed to be here. His farmhands weren't due until noon, and he lived alone. Setting the mug down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the porch, Wyatt shot to his feet. His boots thudded against the wooden planks as he leaned over the railing, squinting toward the barn. There it was, his tractor, rolling out from behind the shed, a cloud of dust kicking up in its wake. The engine growled louder as it picked up speed, cutting across the field like a runaway beast. Wyatt's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. What in the hell? At first, he thought maybe one of his farmhands had shown up early, taking the tractor for a spin without asking. But then he saw her, a figure perched high in the driver's seat, blonde hair whipping in the wind, one hand on the wheel and the other holding something out in front of her. A phone. She was filming herself, her voice carrying faintly over the rumble of the engine, too chipper and loud for the chaos she was causing. Behind her, hitched to the tractor, was his old hay wagon, packed with people, strangers, dressed in bright colors and floppy hats, clinging to the sides like they were on some amusement park ride gone wrong. Wyatt's stomach dropped. This wasn't a farmhand. This was trouble, big, loud, city slicker trouble. He bolted down the porch steps, nearly tripping over his own feet as he sprinted toward the field, his coffee forgotten and his morning peace obliterated. Whoever this woman was, she had no business on his tractor, no business on his land. And as the dust cloud grew thicker and the tractor veered toward his freshly plowed field, Wyatt knew one thing for sure. This day was about to get a whole lot messier than he'd ever bargained for. Wyatt Harper's boots pounded the dirt as he raced toward the field, his breath coming in sharp bursts. The tractor's engine roared louder now, a mechanical beast tearing through his sanctuary. He squinted through the rising dust and finally got a clear look at the culprit, a young woman with bleach blonde hair, perched in the driver's seat like she owned the place. She wore a white blouse, too pristine for farm work, and held the phone outstretched, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Welcome to my exclusive farm tour, everyone," she chirped, way too enthusiastic. "Today we're diving into real rural life." Behind her, the hay wagon jostled violently, packed with a dozen strangers. They weren't farmhands or neighbors, city folks, dressed in garish outfits that screamed tourist trap. A woman in a neon pink sundress clutched oversized sunglasses, her face paling with every bump. A man in a Hawaiian shirt gripped the wagon's edge, muttering under his breath. Wyatt's blood boiled. Who the hell was this woman, and what gave her the right to turn his farm into her personal circus? He waved his arms, shouting, "Hey, stop that tractor, now!" But she barely glanced his way, giving a dismissive flick of her hand. "Oh, hey, farmer dude," she called, then turned back to her phone. "Looks like the farm owner's super excited to see us." Excited? Wyatt nearly choked on his own spit. Furious didn't even cover it. He sprinted harder, cutting across the field as she veered toward his freshly plowed land, the tractor's tires chewing up the soil he'd spent hours perfecting. The wagon's passengers looked less thrilled by the second. A middle-aged guy in khakis yelled, "Is this supposed to be fun?" while a woman with a designer purse shrieked as the wagon hit a rut, rocking her sideways. Wyatt caught snippets of the woman's chatter. She was live streaming, for God's sake. "For just $50, you get the ultimate farm experience," she gushed. $50? Wyatt's mind reeled. She was charging these people to trespass on his land? He recognized her type instantly. An influencer, one of those social media clowns who thought authenticity was something you could fake with a filter and a hashtag. Her name floated up from the chaos. Lila Grayson. She'd called herself in her spiel. Wyatt didn't care who she was. She had his tractor, his wagon, and his patience stretched to the breaking point. He shouted again, "Lila, get off my tractor." She turned her head slightly, flashing a grin that said she wasn't taking him seriously. "Relax, farmer dude, I got this." She didn't have anything. The tractor lurched forward, the wagon swaying dangerously, and Wyatt's stomach twisted. That machine wasn't a toy. It was a $40,000 investment, built for plowing fields, not hauling screaming tourists. He picked up his pace, determined to stop her before she wrecked everything he'd built. But as Lila steered toward the heart of his farm, oblivious to the damage in her wake, Wyatt realized this wasn't just an annoyance. This was war. Expansion tips. Add tourist backstories, e.g., the couple bickering about vacation choices, Lila's exaggerated tour promises, and Wyatt's memories of past trespassers. Wyatt's lungs burned as he chased the tractor, his boots sinking into the soft earth with every stride. Lila Grayson was a blur atop the machine, her blonde hair whipping wildly as she steered with one hand and filmed with the other. "Get ready for a ride you'll never forget," she shouted into her phone, her voice dripping with fake cheer. The wagon rattled behind her, its passengers clinging for dear life as it bounced over the uneven ground. Wyatt's freshly plowed field stretched out ahead, hours of work, now in the path of this reckless joyride. He waved his arms like a madman, yelling, "Lila, stop. You're ruining my land." She didn't even flinch, too busy narrating her authentic farm adventure to notice the chaos she was causing. The tractor's tires gouged deep ruts into the soil, kicking up clumps of dirt that pelted Wyatt as he closed the gap. He cursed under his breath. This wasn't just about the tractor anymore. It was his farm, his livelihood, and she was treating it like a damn theme park. The tourists weren't enjoying it either. The woman in the pink sundress shrieked as the wagon hit a bump, her sunglasses flying off. "This is insane," she cried. The Hawaiian shirt guy gripped the railing, his knuckles white. "I want off this thing," he bellowed. Wyatt almost felt sorry for them. Almost. They'd paid for this madness, after all. But his sympathy evaporated when he saw where Lila was headed, the pig pen, where his hogs were wallowing in blissful ignorance. "No, no, no," Wyatt shouted, veering to intercept her. The tractor took a sharp turn, and the wagon wobbled dangerously, tilting on two wheels. A man in a polo shirt yelped, nearly tumbling out, but grabbed the edge at the last second. The others screamed, clutching each other as Lila plowed forward, oblivious. "Next stop, adorable farm animals," she announced, panning her camera toward the pigs. "For just $10, you can feed them." Wyatt's heart pounded. She had no idea what she was doing. Those pigs weren't adorable. They were 300-pound beasts who'd knock her flat if she got too close. He sprinted alongside the tractor, close enough now to see her face. All smug confidence, no clue. "Lila, stop!" he roared, grabbing the side of the machine. She jolted, finally noticing him, and sighed like he was the problem. "Relax, farmer dude. I'm giving people a taste of the simple life." "Simple life?" Wyatt snapped, breathless. "You're about to crash into my pigs." She rolled her eyes, revving the engine as if to prove a point. The tractor lurched forward, and Wyatt stumbled back, watching in horror as she barreled toward the pen. The pigs scattered, squealing, and the wagon rocked again, sending the tourists into a fresh wave of panic. This wasn't a tour, it was a disaster, and Wyatt was running out of time to stop it. Expansion tips: detail the field's destruction, add pig personalities, e.g., a grumpy sow, and extend the tourists' panicked banter. Wyatt skidded to a halt as Lila steered the tractor straight into the lower field, a patch he'd watered the day before. The soil was soft, a deceptive layer of mud waiting beneath the surface. "Lila, stop!" he yelled, his voice raw. "That's a mud pit." She didn't hear, or didn't care, too busy grinning into her phone. "Oh my gosh, guys, this is the ultimate farm experience," she squealed. "Real dirt, real adventure." The front wheels hit the muck first, and the tractor lurched, sinking fast. The back tires spun wildly, spraying brown sludge in every direction. The wagon rocked violently, and the tourists screamed, abandoning ship as the whole mess tilted. The woman in the pink sundress landed on her knees, mud splattering her dress. "My outfit," she wailed. The Hawaiian shirt guy groaned, wiping grime off his face. "This is not what I paid for." Lila, still in the driver's seat, froze as the tractor sank deeper, the engine whining in protest. "Oh no! Oh no!" she shrieked, slamming her foot on the gas. Big mistake. The tires churned uselessly, flinging a chunk of mud straight into her face. She gasped, her hands flying to her cheeks as the wet earth streaked down her blouse. "My hair! My makeup!" she wailed, her influencer poise crumbling. Wyatt crossed his arms, fighting a grin. Karma, served fresh and filthy. The tourists, now on solid ground, pulled out their phones, not for selfies, but to record the fiasco. "Worst tour ever," muttered a woman with a muddy handbag, shaking her head. The polo shirt guy laughed outright, aiming his camera at Lila. "This is going viral." Lila's eyes widened, darting between the sinking tractor and her audience. "No big deal, everyone," she said, her voice unnervingly high. "Just a little farm authenticity." Wyatt stepped closer, his boots squelching in the damp grass. "Authenticity, huh? Looks like you're stuck." Lila glared at him, mud dripping from her chin. "Fix it. Get it out." He raised an eyebrow, suppressing a laugh. "Oh no, you were so confident a minute ago. Why don't you handle it?" Her nostrils flared, and she jabbed a finger at him. "I don't have time for this. I have a brand to maintain." "Your brand's about to be Mud Girl," Wyatt said, nodding at the phone still rolling. Her face paled. "Wait, are they posting this?" The Hawaiian shirt guy smirked. "Oh yeah, it's live." Lila let out a dramatic groan, throwing her hands up as the tractor settled deeper into the mire. For once, she was silent, her perfect plan buried in the muck along with Wyatt's machine. He leaned against a fence post, watching her squirm. This was almost worth the headache, almost. Expansion tips: describe the mud's texture and smell, extend Lila's meltdown with more dramatics, and add tourist commentary. Wyatt stood by the mud pit, arms crossed, as Lila climbed down from the tractor, her sneakers sinking into the sludge. She looked like a drowned rat, hair stringy, blouse a patchwork of brown stains, but her attitude hadn't drowned yet. "Okay, farmer dude," she snapped, wiping mud from her face. "Just get your stupid tractor out, and let's call it a day." Wyatt smirked. "Not so fast. You stole my property, trashed my field, and scared my pigs. You don't get to waltz off that easy." The tourists lingered, some filming, others muttering about refunds. The pink sundress woman scoffed. "I'm not spending my afternoon watching her pretend she knows what she's doing." Lila spun toward her, forcing a smile. "Small hiccup, everyone. Just a real-life farming challenge." Her voice shook, and no one bought it. The Hawaiian shirt guy crossed his arms. $50 for a mud bath? Where's the baby animals you promised? Wyatt stepped forward, towering over Lila. Get off my farm before you hurt someone, including yourself. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please, I was borrowing it for educational purposes. You should thank me for the attention. He laughed, sharp and dry. Educational? They're learning how to sue you? Maybe. My farm doesn't need your kind of attention. Lila huffed, glancing at the tourists' phones. Her brand was crumbling, and she knew it. Fine, she said, squaring her shoulders. What do you want? A shout-out on my channel. Wyatt tapped his chin, pretending to mull it over. Tempting, but no. How about this? You help out here for a day, and I'll pull the tractor out. Her jaw dropped. Work? On a farm? No way. He shrugged. Suit yourself. That tractor's not moving without me. The tourist snickered, and Lila's face flushed red. She glared at him, then at the muddy wreck, weighing her options. Finally, she threw up her hands. Ugh, fine. But I'm not touching anything gross. Wyatt grinned. We'll see. She stomped off toward the barn, mud squelching with every step, while the tourists began drifting away, shaking their heads. Wyatt watched her go, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief settling in. He'd dealt with trespassers before. Kids, mostly, but Lila Grayson was a new breed, entitled, clueless, and about to get a crash course in real farm life. He almost felt bad for her. Almost. As the dust settled and the field grew quiet again, he glanced at the tractor, half buried and silent. This wasn't over yet, but for now, he'd won the first round. Expansion tips. Add a flashback to Wyatt's past trespasser encounters, extend the negotiation with Lila, and detail the tourist's departure. Wyatt led Lila to the chicken coop, her every step a squelching protest against the mud still clinging to her sneakers. She looked ridiculous, blouse ruined, hair a mess, but her scowl said she wasn't ready to quit fighting. Let's get this over with, she snapped, crossing her arms. Wyatt handed her a bucket of grain, his lips twitching with amusement. Simple job, sprinkle this around. The chickens'll handle the rest. Lila grabbed the bucket like it was radioactive and trudged to the coop's fence. She tossed a handful of feed onto the ground, barely looking, and the chickens swarmed, feathers flapping, beaks pecking. She stumbled back, eyes wide. Oh my God, they're like little dinosaurs. Wyatt chuckled, leaning against the barn. Pretty accurate. They're smarter than they look. One bold hen, a speckled troublemaker Wyatt called Gertie, spotted the bucket still in Lila's hand. With a flutter of wings, she hopped onto the fence, then onto Lila's arm. Lila shrieked, flailing wildly, and the grain went flying, scattering across the yard. The chickens lunged for it, a feathered frenzy, and Lila tripped over a pile of straw, landing flat on her back with a thud. Wyatt covered his mouth, trying not to laugh. You okay there, farm girl? She sat up, straw sticking to her mud-caked clothes, and shot him a glare that could have curdled milk. This is humiliating, she spat, brushing herself off. You wanted authenticity, he said, shrugging. This is as real as it gets. She groaned, pushing to her feet, and muttered something about savage birds. The chickens clucked on, oblivious to her drama, pecking at the last of the grain. Wyatt crossed his arms, watching her struggle to regain composure. That's the easiest job here, and you're already down. Ready for the next one? Her nostrils flared, but she nodded, too stubborn to back out now. He almost admired her grit, almost. The tourists were gone, but he imagined them laughing if they'd seen this. Lila dusted off her hands, smearing more dirt across her palms, and squared her shoulders. Fine. What's next? He grinned, knowing the real fun was just beginning. She'd hijacked his tractor, trashed his field, and now she'd face the consequences, one clucking, bleeding, muddy task at a time. The chickens settled back into their routine, and Wyatt turned toward the goat pen, already picturing her next meltdown. This was going to be a long day, for her, at least. Wyatt ushered Lila to the goat pen, where Buster and Clyde were already eyeing her with mischief. The goats were scruffy, horned troublemakers, Buster playful, Clyde stubborn, and Wyatt figured they'd give her a run for her money. Next job, he said, handing her a hoof trimmer. Check and trim their hooves. Think you're up for it. Lila hesitated, eyeing the animals warily. They won't bite me, will they? He smirked. Not if you do it right. She knelt beside Buster, reaching for his hoof with the caution of someone defusing a bomb. The moment her fingers brushed it, Buster yanked his leg back and licked her face with a sloppy, wet tongue. Lila screamed, tumbling backward into the dirt, arms flailing. Wyatt doubled over, laughter bursting out before he could stop it. "He licked me," she shrieked, wiping her cheek furiously. "That means he likes you," Wyatt said, still chuckling. "I do not like him back," she snapped, scrambling up. Her blouse was a lost cause now, streaked with mud and goat spit. She glared at Buster, who bleated innocently, then at Wyatt. "This isn't funny." He wiped a tear from his eye. "Oh, it's a little funny." She huffed, brushing dirt off her knees, and tried again, grabbing Clyde's hoof this time. He planted his feet, refusing to budge, and she tugged harder, grunting with effort. "Come on, you dumb goat." Clyde responded by butting her lightly with his horns, sending her sprawling again. Wyatt laughed so hard he had to brace himself against the fence. "You're a natural," he managed, catching his breath. Lila sat up, fuming, her hair a tangled mess. "These animals hate me," she wailed. "Nah," Wyatt said, "they're just testing you. Farm life's not all selfies and sunshine." She pushed to her feet, clutching the trimmer like a weapon. "I'm done with goats. What's next?" He raised an eyebrow, impressed she hadn't quit yet, but he wasn't letting her off easy. "One more task," he said, pointing to the pig pen. Her face fell, and he grinned wider. "You're gonna love this one." She groaned, stomping after him, her sneakers caked in dirt and her pride in tatters. The goats bleated behind her, as if mocking her retreat, and Wyatt shook his head. This was better than he'd hoped. Wyatt handed Lila a shovel at the pig pen's edge, the air thick with the ripe stench of muck. "Final job," he said, barely hiding his grin. "Pen needs cleaning." Her body tensed, her nose wrinkling. "No," she said, like it was negotiable. "Wasn't a question," he replied, nudging the shovel into her hands. She took it, jaw clenched, and muttered something venomous under her breath as she stepped inside. The pigs, big, curious brutes, snuffled closer, and she gagged. "Oh my God, this is worse than the mud." Wyatt leaned against the fence, watching her scoop half-heartedly, holding the shovel at arm's length. "Get away from me," she whined as a pig nudged her leg. They took it as an invitation, crowding her, sniffing her muddy sneakers. One hefty sow, Daisy, bumped her harder, and Lila lost her balance, landing face-first in a pile of exactly what she was supposed to clean. Her scream echoed across the farm, shrill enough to scatter the chickens. Wyatt whistled low, biting back a laugh. "You okay there?" She sat up, horror etched on her face, muck smeared across her cheek. "I hate you," she spat, flinging the shovel down. "Nah," he said, grinning, "you hate farming." She scrambled up, shaking filth from her hands, and stormed toward him. "I'm done. You win. Just get your stupid tractor out." He took his time strolling to his second tractor, parked behind the barn, and hooked up the chains. Within minutes, he'd pulled the stuck one free, the engine rumbling back to life. Lila's mouth fell open. "You could have done that the whole time," she screeched. He smirked. "Yep." Her face turned beet red, fists clenched, but before she could explode, a car rolled up the drive, Sheriff Hank Tillman, stepping out with a sigh. Sheriff Hank Tillman surveyed the scene, muddy field, fuming Lila, and Wyatt leaning against his freed tractor. "What in the world's going on?" Hank asked, his voice gruff. Wyatt gestured at Lila. "She borrowed my tractor for a farm tour. Got creative with the mud." Hank shook his head, pulling out his notepad. "Lila, what did I tell you about trespassing?" She crossed her arms, pouting. "It wasn't trespassing. It was a cultural experience." "Did Wyatt give you permission?" Hank asked. Her silence spoke volumes. He scribbled something, then looked at Wyatt. "Pressing charges?" Wyatt glanced at Lila, mud-soaked, humiliated, her tour a viral joke. She'd suffered enough. "Nah," he said. "She's learned her lesson." Lila perked up. "Really?" He grinned. "But if I catch you here again, I won't be so nice." Hank tucked his notepad away. "You're lucky, Lila. Get cleaned up and go home." She didn't argue, stomping to her car, muttering the whole way. As she drove off, a tourist, the Hawaiian shirt guy, approached Wyatt. "That was a disaster, but damn entertaining. If you ever do real tours, let me know." Wyatt chuckled. "I'll think about it." The man waved, heading off, and the farm fell quiet again. Wyatt leaned against the tractor as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the fields gold. The chaos was over, Lila gone, tourists dispersed, his farm his own again. He replayed the day, her tractor theft, the mud pit, her pigpen flop. He smirked, muttering, "Welcome to real farm life." She wouldn't be back, that was for sure. Her brand was toast, and he'd bet those videos were racking up views by now. He walked the field, inspecting the damage, ruts to fix, soil to smooth. Hard work, but nothing he couldn't handle. The animals settled into their evening routine, clucking and bleating softly. That tourist's words lingered. Real tours? Maybe. Not Lila's nonsense, but something honest, showing folks what farming really meant. He'd mull it over. For now, he grabbed his chipped mug from the porch, the coffee long cold, and took a sip anyway. The farm stretched out before him, peaceful and unbroken. He'd won, not just against Lila, but for the life he'd built. The sunset glowed, and Wyatt nodded to himself. Perfect ending to a hell of a day.